The Indianapolis Colts have breakout talent on the roster. So, who has the skills to make it happen? Which names will elevate the most? And who do you, the fans, expect to rise to the occasion in 2025 as a potential breakout star? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast, as always presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. My name is Drake Wally, deputy editor for the site and co-host of the show, joined by Noah Gebert, analyst for the site and fellow co-host of the show. Noah, this one is going to be fun because we're talking about the talents on Indianapolis that really have a chance to look incredible and really help this team, because you can never be short of playmakers. You can never be short of talent that just ascends on a new level. Like, and it's sometimes when you didn't even expect it. But how are you doing, man? It's Monday, start of a new week. How was your weekend? And what do you think about some of these guys here?
Yeah, it's good. Good to start talking about some of these guys that are, good to be on the positive side of some of the reporting that we're doing. I know a lot of this offseason has been focused on the controversy at quarterback and the doom and gloom of what could be another season that's similar to seasons that we've seen in the past. But it's good to recognize that there's some guys on this Colts roster that are obviously young guys that have a lot of potential that could take the next step forward. I think as much as we can see this season being a disaster, I think we can see them doing enough to win a conference or win a division title, get to the playoffs, and make some noise. So, I think we can go either way. And when we're talking about that range of results there, we're really looking at these guys that we're about to go over down this list on and discuss like the performances that they could have this season and how they could help lead this team to more victories. So yeah, there's a lot of good young talent on the team. I think the Colts are kind of in that phase where they're desperate for some of these guys to be breakout guys. So labeling them breakout guys is really what we're going to be looking at doing today, and kind of looking at how likely that's going to be this next season.
Yeah, and they're guys that, like Noah said, are in a position to, some of them are at a crossroads already, where it's like, are you really legit? Can you be that star? Can you really have that season where we start to see everything get put together? But as people jump into the chat here, so we'll go ahead and start off here with a guy that I really think has honestly star written all over him because of his technicality, because of how ready he was to play. But that right there is going to be former first overall defender taken in the 2024 NFL draft, Laiatu Latu. So we've mentioned this quite a bit on the show, but Latu's situation when he came onto the team was to primarily be in on passing downs. That's where he really shines. He's an okay run defender, but he really excels just getting to the quarterback, getting pressures on the quarterback. So in brief, what did you think of Latu's season last year? And, before we kind of break into, how he could be a breakout star, how Colts are looking at him like that, what are you really expecting from him in year two?
Yeah. First off, I think this is just such an obvious name to throw on this list. If you're talking about a guy who was the first defensive player taken off the board 1 year ago, then yeah, you should expect him to at least have that ability to break out and be one of the star players on your team and really transform your defense. Year one, I think the Colts fans, I think everybody went into that with a little bit too high of expectations in terms of raw numbers that you want to see him put up. Just because so long you were used to these project players being selected by the Colts, and then the Colts go out and select in the first round a guy who's been proven to be productive in college and doesn't have as much of those high upside athletic traits, and has more so that proven production and that refinement in the technique. So you were expecting that to translate right away. And in a way, I think it did. It just didn't turn into that double-digit sack season that a lot of fans were expecting for it to have that immediate impact. I still think he came onto the field and he made some impactful plays. Mostly it was on those passing downs, like they had envisioned that role being, but I think his role got expanded a little bit more than you wanted it to be in his rookie season with the injury to Samson Ebukam. I think Samson Ebukam coming back this season, the addition of JT Tuimoloau in the draft, I think really changes things, and you can kind of really just play him at will and really delve into those snaps and really hone in on those snaps that you want him to come in and be productive. And I think that'll influence him in the long run. Yeah, so I think you're going to see a little bit of uptick in terms of production. Maybe the snap count is about the same as it was this season. I think you would normally expect that to increase from rookie year to his second year, but he was asked to play a lot in his rookie year. So maybe you see that snap count kind of level out and be exactly what it was, or right around what it was last season. But those snaps that he's getting, he's going to be a little bit more productive on.
Yeah, and it is encouraging to see that, there were multiple times where he was incredibly close to a sack. And I know that people were,
Mm-hmm.
honing in really deep on the fact that it's like, hey, this guy isn't getting any sort of, sacks. He's not accumulating the numbers. And he was incredibly close, though. And you
Yeah.
would have quarterbacks step up into the pocket. There'd be times where the internal pressure wasn't necessarily there. So quarterbacks are able to come up into the pocket because let's face it, Grover Stewart, great run defender, he's not
Mm-hmm.
going to really, erupt in the passing against the pass. So
Yeah.
I liked Latu's tenacity. He also forced 3 fumbles. And in fact, one of them was against the Bears, a game I was at, and it clinched the game. It was
Mm-hmm.
literally a game ending type play. So he's got that ability. But I'm looking at the numbers here, and he played 618 total snaps, 375 on pass, and 235 on run. Now, that's only, if I'm looking at the numbers, 49 less than Kwity Paye.
Yeah.
And that's not what they wanted him to do. I can tell you that right now. But he's still got 38 pressures, good enough for second on the team. The guy has the ability. Do you think that adding JT to Amoliau is going to impact any of Latu's production or reps? Because they did pick him in the second round.
Yeah, I think that just gives you a little bit more flexibility. I'm not sure when it comes down to it that Tuimoloau is a guy that you're going to keep Latu off the field for. But if you have the opportunity to keep Latu a little bit fresher going into those passing situations by rotating a guy like Tuimoloau in, then I think the Colts would take advantage of that. They've always been big fans of a lot of rotation, going 8 or 9 deep on the defensive line and keeping fresh guys on the field at all times. So yeah, I think that he's not going to necessarily eat into those snaps. And maybe at the end of the day, it does look like he's getting a little bit less snaps, but I think that will be by design, and it's not because Latu's not talented enough to play or he's being outpushed by a guy like Tuimoloau on the roster. I think they're going to Latu's going to get his snaps, and I think looking down that depth chart at defensive end, you've got Kwity Paye, who's he has the ability to take the next step, some people might say, but I think at this point you mostly expect him to be what he is. Tyquan Lewis, you expect him to be what he is. Samson Ebukam, who knows what he is after the injury, after that Achilles injury at 30 years old. So really, when you're looking at that group, you're looking at Latu as the guy that's going to be able to take that step forward. And in order to get consistent pressure, 38 pressures is, it's not a ton. You want to see that number go up, but really that 4 sacks that you saw his rookie season, you really want to see that number start to go up, and his ability to finish those pressures that he gets on the quarterback really convert into sacks. And you want to see him win a little bit more consistently against some of the premier offensive tackles in the league. I think most of those pressures that he was getting, or a lot of those pressures he was getting, was against some of those matchups that you would expect a guy like him to win. You want to see him go into this season going up against some of the top tackles in the league and able to make some noise against them as well.
Yeah, and he's nimble. He's got an ability to bend and get underneath arms and underneath, pass blocking. And he also came into the NFL more polished. So It's like you're expecting him as early as, look, year 2, you were taken 15th overall. We took a chance on you because no one else was picking defensive players. And I think that the Colts benefited because I do think Latu's ceiling is good. But that's another guy, we don't have to talk too long about it. But that would have been another guy. He's, full disclosure, guys, he's not on the list. Kwity Paye.
Yeah.
You're waiting for him to break out. Yeah, he led the team in sacks last year, but there wasn't much going on with pressure. And clearly the sack numbers, I'm not saying you got to have a guy in double digits necessarily, but the Colts had Samson Ebukam with 9.5 and they still did better, So brief, because we can just talk about it for a second. Kwity Paye, what do you think? They took his 5th-year option.
Yeah.
They've got confidence in him.
Yeah, that's a guy with a similar investment that you have in Latu, right? I think at this point in Kwity Paye's career, you're looking at year 5, and I think by this point you have a big enough sample size that you're not really expecting that big leap. I wouldn't expect his pressures to jump up a ton or his sack numbers to jump up a ton, unless you're really getting exotic with how things you're doing on the defensive line look. And who knows what that looks like with Lou Anarumo. I think it's probably going to look pretty similar, and the roles for these defensive ends are going to probably be pretty close to what they were in Gus Bradley's scheme this past season. So I don't expect those numbers to jump up a ton. But yeah, you're looking at a guy who was taken in the first round. and has turned into a solid starter on the defensive edge, and you are okay with that. I think when you selected him, you were hoping for a little bit more juice and a little bit more in the passing game that he could provide you, but you ended up getting what you got. I think at this point, with how the team's constructed, I think you're really happy having him opposite Laiatu Latu, because I think he really excels in some of those things that Laiatu Latu really needs to develop a little bit in terms of his strength in the run game. So you've got a guy who's going to complement Laiatu Latu really well. But yeah, I'm not really expecting him to jump out this year and be this elite pass rushing threat, in addition to his ability to stop the run at a pretty solid clip. So yeah, I think he's mostly, we've seen. I'd venture to say we've seen what we're going to see from Kwity Paye.
Yeah, and in brief, I know that Colts fans are, kind of talking about how, hey, next level, next level, next level. Like Noah said, it's pretty much, I think he might have a little more to climb. He was only 1.5 sacks away from 10, which it's like 9.5.
Yeah.
People don't talk. 10.0 and up, people wet their pants over that. They're like, oh my gosh, the guy's elite. And it's like, Yannick Ngakoue, led the team in sacks not long ago, and he was doing cleanup duty. That's how he got a lot of his sacks. So, but Laiatu Latu, man, we think highly of him on the show. His tape is awesome. I'll just never forget being at that Bears game, and they were 21-16. They were pushing. They were getting ready to try to mount the drive, and Latu just went in there and literally didn't even touch Caleb Williams. He just took the ball out. It was absolutely clean as hell. So you're
seeing a knack for him to make that play as a rookie, I think is super impressive. Even if you're not getting those raw numbers of the amounts of pressures and the amounts of sacks, maybe you want to see those go higher. But just having the head to make that play in the closing moments of a game, I think is really, really exciting to see from a rookie, and you expect to see that more throughout his career.
Yeah. Well, we will have to see if he takes that next step, because he's going to be relied upon to make some big things happen. So this next guy, it's pretty clear we like him. On the show, we talk a whole bunch about this pass catcher. We think that he's going to have an absolutely wonderful career. That's Josh Downs. Now, in short, no pun intended, if you haven't been caught up on Colts stuff, Chris Ballard, in a sentence, took this guy who's about 5'9", and he was known for drafting 6-foot+ receivers. And so clearly there was something special about him with the Tar Heels. I think he has the most catches. I think he had the most catches of any Colts rookie in the history of the team, and that was last year with 68 catches. He only started 9 games. Of course, he started 8 this year, but he missed 3 games. Led the team in catches with 72. So through your first 2 years with uncertain quarterback play and a guy who was incredibly inaccurate last year, you're still talking about 72 catches in 14 games. That's roughly about almost 5 a game. Well, actually, almost. Let's see, how bad is my math? No, that's about 5 a game, because, that's about 5. It's a little over 5 a game. Very impressive. Before we dive into what were your thoughts on Josh Downs last year, and what are your thoughts on him this year?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that's going to get a little bit more recognition nationally this upcoming season. I think when you're talking about breakout guys, he seems like he's the most obvious, because I think he's leaned into that a little bit more than some of these other guys that we're going to go through on the list. Where they've at least shown something that's pretty close in Josh Downs, where you've seen somebody who's a super productive receiver. I know 803 yards, but the amount of time that he played really kind of hindered his ability to take that stat line over 1,000, like you would like to see a premier receiver have. So I think, this is probably the first year that you see him, barring any injuries, get 1,000 yards and really step up into that conversation of wide receiver ones amongst the league.
Yeah, and we mentioned this on an episode before. Josh Downs' impact is going to be determined potentially, we're not saying it will be, but potentially by if Daniel Jones starts over Anthony Richardson, because he hits the short balls. I wouldn't say he's a safe thrower, because he's thrown quite a few picks, I think 47 in 70 games. So he's not out there throwing it super safe. But right now, he is more accurate than Richardson. He has more experience than Richardson. He's similar, not as good, but in a way similar athletically. So he can still run the offense. They're still going to run the ball. It's probably the best cast he's been surrounded by. So before we even dive into this, even with your best expectations, how does Downs perform with Richardson? How do you think Downs performs with Jones?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question to answer, because I think On the
It
surface,
is.
it seems like Downs and Richardson have this really good chemistry. They talk well about each other. Josh Downs has always defended him in interviews in the locker room when they were going through that situation with the benching last year, and this Daniel Jones situation or the competition coming up this training camp. He's always spoken highly of Anthony Richardson. We remember that story of right after they got drafted, they were throwing balls in the parking lot trying to get acquainted and get that chemistry together. I mean, so all the right things are there, but on the field, you just haven't really seen Anthony Richardson have that chemistry with Josh Downs, or at least not any more than Gardner Minshew has, or Joe Flacco has, or other guys that have come in and played quarterback. They've all seemed to be able to find Josh Downs at a similar level. So I don't think him playing with Anthony Richardson, despite them being in the same draft class and coming into the league, coming into the team together, and all having all this off-field work together and seemingly being pretty good friends. I don't necessarily think that gives Anthony Richardson or Josh Downs an advantage when Anthony Richardson is in at quarterback, because I think Daniel Jones is a guy who's going to be able to find him and be willing to take those intermediate throws and those short throws and those quick win passes. I think he'll be able to complete those at a little bit higher clip than Anthony Richardson has, just because historically that's what we've seen from Anthony Richardson, unless we see something incredibly different and a huge uptick in terms of his accuracy. So yeah, I think just based off of personalities and the storylines of the past, it seems like Anthony Richardson's the guy. But when it comes down to play styles, it seems like it might be more like a Daniel Jones type of receiver.
Nice to see you, Donald. Yeah, look, man, the kid has got ridiculous potential, and with Steichen's offense, because
Mm-hmm.
you have a nice blend. This is a receiving core that's not. I think this isn't biased either. You know, like as analysts, we have to be right down the middle, and there's great receiving tandems out there, but no one really talks about the Colts. Like they have Pittman, who's the possession guy. He can win quick. He can win intermediate. Not known as much for his deep
Yeah.
ball or for his deep, prowess, but he can pretty much do everything. He can soak up a lot of targets. And then you've got Alec Pierce, who will stretch that defense. He literally led the league in yards per catch last year. He had almost 900 on like 30 some odd catches. So you've got a guy who's going to threaten deep. Every game plan has to factor in. Now you've also got Tyler Warren, who I think right away is going to outplay every single tight end, as far as a receiver especially. So he's going to be there for the seam routes, the middle of the field, the short
Yep.
ball. And now you've got potentially A.D. Mitchell if he can do something. So that, even removing A.D., Josh Downs has got so much to work with, and you put him in the fray with all these guys. The Colts have a way to attack you in the passing game everywhere.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And no one's a star, but altogether, they're a solid tandem. Now, the question is, can Anthony Richardson be accurate? What are just ballpark, shoot it out of a cannon, stat line prediction, just receptions, yards, touchdowns. What are you thinking?
84 catches, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. Well, it's just just going off the top of my head, based off of the production that he's had in years past. That's with a fully healthy season. I imagine that will be with some mixture of Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones throughout the season. I don't think it's going to be one guy locking down that spot all year. So he'll deal with it. I mean, that's a little bit more adversity. I think when you're talking about around the league, how the Colts don't really get talked about in terms of their receiving core, I think they've got two things at a disadvantage for them. Is one, I don't think you've seen the quarterback consistency there. I mean, you definitely haven't seen the quarterback consistency there to allow those guys to produce at levels that would kind of garner that attention to be up there with other groups in the league. And then secondly, I don't think you've seen all these guys in the same year produce together. Or last year, you really saw Josh Downs come out of his shell and play at a higher level than he did in his rookie year, and you expect that to ascend. But during that same year, you had Michael Pittman hindered by a pretty bad back injury he was suffering from throughout the year. So you really want to see all these guys at full strength, and I do think that's going to benefit Josh Downs. While there might be a few more targets that have to be spread out to some of these other guys, I think that is going to give him better matchups when you're respecting a little bit more on the outside Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce after Alec Pierce's breakout year last year. And then you've got also on the inside a guy like Tyler Warren who's going to draw some, you're not always going to want to have a linebacker in there on Tyler Warren. You're going to want to shade a nickel corner in there sometimes if you're worried about deeper route, or you're going to bump a safety in there, and then you got to have to. I mean, you're just going to have to balance who you have on him and who you have on Josh Downs. When you've got two guys in the middle of the field like that who are going to be able to probably win whatever matchup you throw at them. So yeah, I think that's going to benefit Josh Downs maybe in terms of just sheer volume of targets and receptions he gets. It's not going to straight up look like that, but I think it is going to put him in some more advantageous situations.
Yeah, and to put a bow on it, he has it's crazy because he started off as mostly the slot guy, whatever, and he's still the slot guy. Okay, he's going to be the slot guy. That's where he has. That's where I think he's going to be the most dangerous because with Richardson especially, you want to have a quick win target. You got to get him in a rhythm so he's hitting short passes. That's why he's such a freaking weird quarterback is he's got the deep ball down, but he can't hit a broadside of a barn in the middle of the field or in that short game. So help him out. They got Warren now and you got Downs, two guys that will dominate that short game. But Downs also dominated the middle of like 15, 20 yards at times. At times he was a deep target.
Yeah.
So he's becoming an all-around receiver, but he'll always be best at winning quick and with crisp route running. So
yeah. And I mentioned this I think in the last show when we were talking about Josh Downs. I like his ability to create after a play breaks down and be there for his quarterback and find the soft spots and zones and really be a playmaker outside of the structure of a play. And if you get a quarterback that's going to be able to take advantage of that, then I really think he has an extra opportunity to take things to another level outside of the structure of the offense.
Yeah, well, we got a nice, collection of guys that we still got to get through here, so we will go ahead and move it along. But yeah, Josh Downs, we think he's the real deal. Next guy here, wasn't really thinking too much about him, right? You're kind of like, he's played, a couple positions, in college, and he shows versatility. Comes onto the team and he proves he's one of the better at his craft anyway, like his specialty, if you will. That's linebacker Jalen Carlisle out of Mizzo. Started as a safety. I like to just kind of backtrack a little bit with all this stuff for anybody who doesn't know these players deep down, is that he started as a safety. And then he ends up becoming a linebacker, but he took that coverage ability and transferred it over. He's probably got some work to do in his ground game, like stopping the ground attack because he's such a light guy. But Shaq Leonard also wasn't big at all, and he did a lot of things well. What did you think of Carlisle? He only played, I think, 10 games. He had some impact, but based off of his coverage, like tape and grades, the dude, by all regard, could be the best coverage linebacker on the Colts. And if he hits his stride, it might not even be close.
Yeah, and this is you got your last year. You had Cato June coaching the linebackers, who was a former safety turned linebacker. Obviously, I think that played into the role of how they felt confident that they could develop a guy like that. New defensive staff coming in this year, but I feel like they feel pretty highly about him on the defensive staff and throughout the front office still, because you really didn't see any effort to push him for competition at that other linebacker starting spot when you let go of EJ Speed. Jalen Carlisle just kind of became the starter opposite Zaire Franklin by default, and really doesn't have much to push him out of that role until we get maybe later into the offseason and see some other additions. But yeah, they must like him, and they better like him if they're not making those additions at linebacker. And I think it's pretty clear to see why. I think you don't want to put too much faith in a former 5th round pick who's going into their sophomore season at a new position, and they weren't even healthy for their whole rookie season. I think you're playing with a couple different scenarios where that could end up going up in flames, where you don't know if he's necessarily, is he a full-time linebacker? We don't know yet because he hasn't been. And is he going to stay healthy for a full season? We don't know that because we haven't seen that yet. So there's a couple of different ways that could backfire on him. So I would have liked them to have hedged their bets a little bit more and added some more competition to that starting spot. But if the Colts feel comfortable with it, then Jalen Carlisle did last year give them some reason to feel comfortable with that. He was really well in coverage, or he did play really well in coverage. You did mention that. He wasn't on the field as much for some of those rundowns. So they had EJ Speed there to fill that role. Shagun Alubi would come in for some of those plays. And I don't think he was a bad tackler, as bad as some of the linebackers and other positions on the Colts defense were at tackling. I don't think Jalen Carlisle was really a part of that problem. I think where you saw most of the issue was him getting up there quickly and into his run fit. So I think with some time, I mean, that was his first year playing the position, and it was playing at an NFL level, and I think that's always going to be tough to do, especially for a fifth round rookie coming in. So I think you would expect to see uh, some improvement there in that sense, and hopefully you don't see any fall off in terms of his coverage game, because I do think a linebacker who specializes in pass coverage at this point in the NFL is worthy of a full-time starting job at linebacker, for that to be one of your linebacker spots. So I think he complements Zaire Franklin really nicely in that sense.
Yeah, and he only played 242 snaps. Looks like 86 were coverage, 146 were run. But he only played 86, but he was fourth out of 189 eligible linebackers
Mhm.
in pass coverage per PFF. So you think about that, and I know that we always have to follow it up with this. It's not gospel, it's not the Bible of sports, but I think it's a pretty solid site. And the guys over there, Trevor Sakema, they all do great. So coverage, he was great, but like you said, he did not play as much as
Yeah.
I even thought he did. He had 10 games, but he had like under 300 snaps. Um, Going back to what you said, I love how you brought this up, that there is potential disaster if the Colts don't do something at linebacker. Because if he does miss any time,
Yeah.
I think you're moving to like Cameron McGrone. I think that you're looking at a guy like Shagun Alubi, like you said, who showed a couple years ago he can start, but maybe more like you're not going to rely on him to start all the time. I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that they still need to potentially sign someone out of free agency? Even a veteran might help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a couple different ways that could be or rough. I think it could be rough for Jalen Carlos if you're not, just because there's the opportunity for him to miss some time and then you're struggling to fill in the gaps. I think if Zaire Franklin also is somebody who's going to miss some time, you're still filling in probably with the same guys in Shagun Alubi, Cameron McGrone, whoever you feel like bumping up into that spot. Uh, but then you have a second year former safety, former fifth round pick playing alongside a former undrafted free agent or what have you. And I mean, that's not going to be good for Jalen Carlisle either, despite some of the opinions on how Zaire Franklin played last year. He's the leader of the defense. He's the most talkative, the most has the most communication. He's going to be the one relaying those play calls. I think taking that away from a young player in Jalen Carlisle and replacing him with another developmental guy who might be swimming in that role a little bit also is going to be rough for him. So you really want to see a full season of both of those guys healthy. Uh, just one to get in the good grace for Zaire Franklin to get in the good graces of Colts fans again, because I think his play didn't warrant the negative opinions that seem to be going around about him right now. That was mostly some off-field stuff that was going on. And then you want Jalen Carlisle to be able to develop into a full-time starting linebacker. And I think him playing alongside a guy like Shagun Alubi instead of Zaire Franklin would really hamper his ability to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, I he's definitely going to get a more prominent role. He's going to have to run defend more, which is it's very curious and weird that he actually was in more on run defense
Yeah.
snaps than
Yeah.
pass coverage.
Yeah, well, you had
So
last year Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed. I mean, Zaire Franklin's probably playing 100% of the snaps, and every other week, EJ Speed was right around 95 to 100%, depending on the game that it was. So really, the only time you had to get him on the field, outside of an EJ Speed injury, was having him on the field for downs where you have three linebackers and you're expecting a run. So he wasn't really on the field that much in terms of downs that you anticipated a pass to be. Neither Zaire Franklin or EJ Speed were really coming off the field or being subbed out in favor of a guy, which makes sense. I mean, last year he was I'm talking this year about him being a second year player who switched positions and how you don't want to rely on him too much. Last year was even more so, where he was a rookie playing a position for the first time. So yeah, you weren't taking guys like EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin off the field for that, despite some of the poor performances that we saw. Largely from EJ Speed on the backside of the defense. So, I mean, you weren't really subbing him out for a guy who wasn't really quite ready to step in full time. So you hope that with this full off season, he is ready to step in full time, because at this point, the Colts really don't have another option.
yeah, and this isn't to like be negative about EJ Speed. This is just something that I discovered um, basically through coverage. So kind of like we mentioned with Jalen Carlisle, 189 eligible linebackers for PFF grades. Now, obviously, some played more, some played less, right? But EJ Speed missed tackles, ladies and gentlemen, 26, 189th out of 189 linebackers. So EJ Speed missed so many tackles it wasn't even funny. And so there was a lot of cleanup duty that had to happen from guys like Nick Cross.
Yeah.
So I think that you're just hoping that Jalen Carlisle is that secure tackler too, because he's going to have to do it a lot. He's not just going to be swatting at passes and trying to pick the ball off. He's going to have to stick his nose in there. I guess when it's all said and done, do you expect him to be able to break out? Let's just hypothetically say he plays 15 plus games.
Yeah. I think the role that he has, the role he's able to fill on the Colts defense is something that the Colts haven't really had for a while in terms of a pass coverage linebacker. I think a linebacker who's good in pass coverage is going to be able to put themselves in more situations where they're able to take advantage of tipped balls or inaccurate throws, or maybe being able to jump some routes. So I think when you're talking about a breakout for linebacker, I mean, you see Zaire Franklin's just sheer tackle numbers. I think those opportunities will be available for Jalen Carlisle. But I think more so, if you're talking about a breakout year for Jalen Carlisle, you're expecting some key pass breakups, some interceptions, just some way to impact in the passing game in ways that linebackers, especially this past season, couldn't.
Yeah, well, it's going to remain to be seen. But I will say that, Donald, real quick, the heck of a hustler, awesome dude. But if you have Liam Anderson playing in the game, your linebacking core has somehow, whichever way, has fallen apart for the year.
Yeah. With the Liam Anderson conversation, we first need to get through training camp in the preseason before we go on to the regular season and see if he's able to make the final 53-man roster. Because you're talking about Lou Anarumo's defense maybe only playing 2 linebackers at a time and very rarely throwing in a third. Probably not keeping more than 5 guys. So I mean, he would be linebacker 5-6 right now at this point. So he's got to beat out some guys in order to make the roster in the first place.
Plus, he's more of a special team guy.
Yeah.
No, we weren't roasting your comment, Donald. We just kind of wanted to explain, like, if he's playing, the Colts have really screwed up linebackers somehow. So you know what, Chet? I believe C.J. Mosley is still available. Let me make sure of that real quick. Yeah, so if they did secure a guy like Mosley, I don't think that he's going to cost as much. He's been hurt. But it does say that the Titans are likely, these are just a couple sources, that they're likely to sign C.J. Mosley. So I think that if they were able to get him, he might want to start. I don't foresee him being like, I'm cool with the depth role. He's going to be cheaper than he's been. But I don't know. What do you think about that one? Because that would be potentially an interesting addition, because he's played really well in the past.
Yeah, I think that'd be an interesting addition. I think Jermaine Pratt's another name you throw out there. At this point, really any veteran linebacker who has some starting experience, I think, is worth taking a shot on, just because the depth is so thin there. If you ever get into a situation where maybe it's a little bit too much for Jalen Carlisle, maybe he's not an outright disaster, but you want to take a step back and let him develop a little bit more into the linebacker that you want him to grow into. You want somebody on the roster who you feel comfortable taking some starting snaps. And at this point, Segun Alubi may be that guy in some eyes in the Colts organization, but I think for the most part, you need to add a new name.
Yeah. Well, real quick, we'll get to JV McHenry's comment here. Who will be the Colts' number 1 receiver next year? So we mentioned this in another episode that we think Josh Downs is going to be that guy. It's just kind of, it might even be inevitable. Like, if he plays enough games, which last year he missed a couple, right? But he still played 14 games and led the team in catches.
Yeah.
So you're missing 3 games there. That's basically like 5 point some odd catches a game. You put that average in there, you have like 87 catches. Like, so if he plays 3 more games, who knows? But we think it's Josh Downs.
Yeah, I think you'll probably see the numbers go up a little bit for Michael Pittman, but just
For
it
sure.
depends how you define number one receiver. Even though he's a slot guy, I still think Josh Downs is going to be the number one receiver in terms of targets, in terms of receptions, most likely in terms of yards. Also, if you're talking touchdowns, it's a little bit harder to predict, and maybe you throw Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman in there into that conversation. But yeah, for the most part, I would say Josh Downs was the most talented receiver on the Colts last year, and going into this season, I expect that to stay the same.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much, JV, for that super chat. You are awesome. So yeah, we got to move on here. The next guy, this is, you usually don't say this about a rookie. But given what the Colts had at this position last year, you're talking about a void and then a complete fill in of that void. This is Tyler Warren. Now, hasn't played a single freaking snap in the NFL yet, so you can't really crown him as this incredible, savior of the Colts offense, which you're also talking about a tight end.
Yeah.
If you're relying on your tight end to save your offense, that's not good. But tore it up at Penn State. He won the Mackey Award, which for those out of the know, it's the best tight end in college football. Think of all the teams. This isn't 32. That's incredibly impressive. He had 104 catches, 1,233 receiving yards. He had 12 total touchdowns. I think he had a touchdown pass, 4 on the ground, 8 through receiving. So what are your thoughts just right out of the gate on Tyler Warren? Because he is potentially going to be the most complete tight end the Colts have ever had.
Yeah, the breakout label is hard to say for a rookie. I think, especially when you're
Very.
talking about tight ends, where I think outside of quarterback, if you're on offense, I think that's the hardest position to learn, because you're learning everything in the run game in terms of run blocking and run fits, and you're learning everything in the pass game in terms of route trees and progressions and everything like that. Not to say that Tyler Warren can't do it. Just historically, rookies at tight end take a little bit longer to acclimate to the NFL. So saying breakout, I think it's normally would be like something you wouldn't really consider for a rookie tight end. Tyler Warren, I think, changes that conversation a little bit, because I think he's going to be able to handle that workload. And he has a really unique opportunity with the Colts, where they were just bare at the position entirely, and bringing him in completely changes the landscape of that room, where you expect him to take pretty much every snap unless he needs a breather or he has an injury or anything like that. He's going to be on the field in run situations. He's going to be on the field in pass situations. He's going to be on the field whether it's 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 14. He's just that guy that's going to be able to do it all for this Colts offense. And I think you got him in one. He's a unique player who the Penn State schemed up some unique plays for him to get him the football. I think Shane Steichen's going to be taking advantage of that skill set a little bit, and I think he's fallen into a good situation where he's gotten a good offensive coordinator, or someone signing the offense in terms of Shane Steichen, who's going to be able to draw up some creative ways to get him the ball also. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of conversation throughout the NFL media and Colts fans locally about how Tyler Warren's really kind of changed the offense and really the things you can do. And one, I mean, outside of just raw numbers that he's going to be able to put up, just like the way that you're going to be able to go out there with the same personnel pretty much on every snap and every huddle, and not really be dictating to the defense what you're going to be doing. Like if you had Mo Alley Cox in there last year, you pretty much expected to run, and Kylan Granson, you were expecting it to be a pass. You just have Tyler Warren out there the whole time. You're really keeping the defense at guessing in terms of what you're going to be doing. So yeah, I think Tyler Warren, just statistically, I think could be a breakout player, and then just in other ways that he's going to be able to affect the offense and in the eyes of the staff and everything like that on the Colts, in the Colts organization. I think they're going to see him as a breakout player as well.
Yeah, and a while ago, I did a way too early prediction on what I just thought his stats might look like.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about 57 catches. Now, if these came true, this is a great year for a rookie tight end, especially in the Colts' run-heavy offense.
Mm-hmm.
57 catches, 688 receiving yards, 12.1 per catch, 65 rushing yards, which that might be a little low, but 11 all-purpose, and I think he'll get 8 receiving. I think that he's going to be a bigger red zone target than people are really talking about, because, yes, you still have Alec Pierce who can get a jump ball. You got Michael Pittman who can basically get any guy off course so that he can catch a football. Then you have Josh Downs, who's the quick win guy, and you got Taylor in the backfield, and God forbid if Richardson's up there. There's so many ways to get Tyler Warren the football around the red zone. So I actually like this comment here from Chetman. Still not happy with the depth behind Warren. Noah, how do you feel about the depth behind Warren, and how do you think that they complement him?
Yeah, I mean, not great. But if you've got a guy like Tyler Warren who's going to be in there for pretty much every situation, maybe the depth isn't as important as it was last year, where you needed multiple tight ends to be able to fill those roles because of the guys you had. You had Kylan Granson, so you needed a good blocker in Mo Alley Cox. You had Mo Alley Cox, so you needed a guy like Will Mallory who could be the speed guy. You have Tyler Warren. You don't necessarily need a specific type of guy behind him. So I think that changes the math a little bit when you're looking at the depth at tight end. But yeah, I mean, it's the same guys that it was last year in terms of the production that you got out of the tight end room and how that was pretty much dead last in terms of position groups throughout the NFL and in terms of their production. So yeah, I mean, I think there's some. I think Mo Alley Cox is a really good blocking tight end. I think that's a valuable role to have on the offense. So I like that he's still in the room with Tyler Warren there heading it up. I didn't like Mo Alley Cox as the headliner of the room, but having him be a role player there on the offense as a blocker makes me feel a lot better. Jelani Woods, Will Mallory, Drew Ogletree, the other names in the room. I don't necessarily think it's as important for them to be breakout players or stars are really able to consistently produce as it was last year. So it's changed the way that I've looked at it. I don't feel any better necessarily about the potential of those guys to break out and really be important players on the Colts offense. Anything more than just minimal snaps on the offensive side of the ball and then snaps on special teams is where they're going to contribute. But uh, if you're looking at if Tyler Warren goes down for any extended a period of time, that definitely changes the conversation. I would feel just the same about them this year in that situation as I did last year, and that is not good.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's all about getting Tyler Warren the football, helping him acquaint to the offense. It's his first year in the NFL, but yes, Chet, the depth behind him is questionable. And if he had to miss any time, I mean, you go right back to pretty much tipping your hat to the defense, and two of your top guys are blockers. So, you got to be able to have something in the receiving game. But we got to kind of get through these next guys a little bit quicker, but we're just going to jump right into it. Mac Gonsalves. So, you talk about a guy who played a whole bunch of tackle last season, left and right. He's being bumped onto the inside, but the Colts traded up to get him. He was hurt almost all of 2023. So when he went into the 2024 NFL draft, he did have injury issues, but he played just as sturdy as hell last season. What are your thoughts on Gonsalves? And do you think that, I mean, guys, before he becomes Will Fries, what Will Fries was, it's going to take probably some time for him to get
Yeah.
real starter reps at a new position.
Yeah. Yeah. And before, I think this is kind of similar to how we had that Liam Anderson conversation where we don't get ahead of ourselves. Before we talk about Matt Gonsalves becoming the next Will Fries, let's talk about him maintaining a starting spot on the lineup, because we
That's
don't know.
fair.
He hasn't done that yet. And just because they've penciled him in, just because they haven't made any other moves on the interior offensive line, I think this is there. We are drawing some parallels to the Jalen Carlisle conversation we had earlier, where you better hope it works out, because you didn't have a plan B behind that, barring any moves that might happen later on in the offseason. So, I mean, anytime you do that and you're kind of throwing a guy into the lineup and not making any moves to change, it seems like the coaching staff, the front office has some confidence that he's able to do that, which I think should make fans feel a little bit easier about him sliding into guard and playing a position that he hasn't played any extended amount of time since high school, I think he said. Because at Pitt, he was bumping back and forth between left and right tackle. Last year during the season, he was bumping back and forth between left and right tackle. His really only experience at guard is a couple snaps in the preseason last year for the Colts. So, I mean, it's still a pretty big projection when you're talking about a guy who's going to have to bump inside and change positions and play more snaps than he has at this point in his career. So, yeah, and you're talking about a guy also that has some injury history in the past. Similar to Jalen Carlisle, then you're also worried about his ability to hold up there inside and play a full season. You're never going to get all five of your starting offensive linemen together. And even when it comes down to that, if you're talking about some injuries that could happen outside to Bernard Ryman and Braden Smith or what have you, then you have Matt Gonsalves as the possibility to bump outside to tackle. He's just got a lot on his plate this year. got a lot coming into just being thrown in there as a starter at a position that he hasn't started at in probably 12 years. And then throwing on top of that he's got to be the next man up probably at a position that he is more familiar with. So he's not really able to solely focus on one spot. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot on the line for him. I think that he has the capability to do it. I think was projected when he was drafted as somebody who could potentially bump inside. So I think even in that post draft press conference that Chris Ballard had after selecting Matt Gonsalves, he did mention that he thought he had that versatility. So at least that was part of the long term vision when he was selected. So it's not totally out of left field that he's bumping in there to guard. But yeah, let's not get too ahead of ourselves in terms of him being the next Will Fries. I know Will Fries really only had that one huge breakout year last season, so it's not like he has that long standing history of success at guard. But yeah, even before we have that conversation, we need to make sure that Matt Gonsalves can play guard and he can stay in the starting lineup there.
It's a really good point. You're hoping because the worst pressure is right up the middle, and you do want to be able to run the football behind him. And if you can have two guards on any offense that can really push in the ground game, man, it brutalizes a defense. You got to start loading the box, and then all of a sudden you're open to a pass downfield. So it would really be nice if he does, especially for Indianapolis's offense, which, as we mentioned, they're going to run the football a lot because obvious reasons. But then we're going to get to a guy here that we've talked incredibly highly about on this show, a guy that really didn't have the expectations to even make the freaking roster. I'll never forget covering the team when he was drafted, and we weren't talking about him making the roster, and that's Jalen Jones at cornerback. So obviously he smashed his 7th round tag. You know, he's definitely worth more than that looking back, and he would have been drafted higher. So you're talking about a guy that's made this happen. He's still only 23 years old, just turned 23, and he's already going into his 3rd season. What'd you think last year? I thought he took a step up, and there is that chance if he continues to elevate, man, he could really be a problem.
Yeah, he could. It worries me a little bit because I think it's no secret how I feel about Jalen Jones and how I think one, yes, definitely he's outplayed his status. I think he's also outplayed what people consider him as at this point in his career. I think he's an average to above average starting corner in the league at this point at 23 years old with room to grow. And I think that's super valuable to have, especially on that 7th round rookie contract that he has, where you're paying him pennies compared to pretty much every starting corner in the league. So, I mean, you've got really a valuable piece if you can keep him and continue to develop him and turn him into something even before he hits his next contract. I think you're playing with house money when you've got a guy like that costing you so little and giving you that kind of production. But what does worry me is that how he's, despite the success that he's had, well, we've had this conversation time and time again with Juju Brents, where this defensive staff is completely new. They did not select Jalen Jones. They have no ties to him. Nothing is lost if they move on to him and play a guy like Justin Wally at the other outside corner spot. That would probably be more likely because he's somebody that this defensive staff has invested in, and historically Lou Anarumo's corners have not had the profile that Jalen Jones has, where he's they like the length, but that long speed is something that's missing from Jalen Jones' game that really hasn't been missing from other starting corners in Lou Anarumo's past and his history and guys that he's gravitated towards. So while I think Jalen Jones is going to probably go out there and play as well as he has and prove himself to be the exception that Lou Anarumo makes to the mold at that position, there is always that worry with a new defensive staff that they just want to get guys that they are, or profiles at least, that they feel more comfortable with at that position. So that worries me a little bit. But I mean, yeah, he's a 23-year-old corner who started from a really early age at the SEC. He's been productive all throughout college. That speed's not flashy, and that probably made him fall a little bit in the draft. But I just hope that doesn't really weigh into the consideration that Lou Anarumo's making at cornerback too much, and they don't try to move on from the Jalen Jones type mold, because I think that the Colts do have a really valuable piece that they can hold on to and develop. His last season was great. I think them moving to more man coverage here under Lou Anarumo could really benefit Jalen Jones. Throw him up on the line, let him use his long arms to play the press, get some guys off, throw off some timing. I think he was really good last year on those in-breaking routes where he was able to stick close to the receiver and break at the last second, where it looks like he might be beat on a slant, but dives out, gets those long arms on a football, and breaks the ball away. So I think this could be advantageous. It could be a complete disaster. I mean, this is a conversation we've had with a lot of these guys on the team where it could really swing one way or the other. But Jalen Jones is really a guy that I feel more solidly than some of these other guys in the group.
Man, he defensed 12 passes last year.
Yeah.
Like that's a solid number.
I'd like to see the breakdown on how often those were ones that were thrown inside on those quick passes. It seemed like pretty much all the time on the outside, if it seemed like a guy had to step on. These were against some really good receivers, against Justin Jefferson, against Jamar Chase, these types of receivers that are in there on the inside, break inside, and he dives and breaks it away. He's done that the past 2 seasons. He's been pretty consistent with that. So those turnover numbers, it was good to see him get those 2 picks in the same game against the Chicago Bears last season. You hope some more ball production comes and maybe just with some safety play that you feel a little bit more comfortable in with a guy like Cam Bynum back there. You're not worried so much about the limitation he might have in terms of long speed.
Yeah, I mean Jalen Jones. Something else before we move on here: 100 tackles last season.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a baller. He was out there making things happen. And yeah, it was Caleb Williams he picked off, but I mean, one of them was an incredible like an incredible interception where it took like toe tapping and everything else. Like he's got ability, and he does have a breakout potential. He really does, especially if he has to take on more of a responsibility. But also keep this in mind: he has Charvarius Ward now. Like he's going to be able to really zone in. He's not going to be. He also snuffs out his targets. Just one last thing: when he was drafted, there wasn't as much tape on the guy as you would hope, but it's because quarterbacks wouldn't go his way.
Yeah.
Like they really wouldn't throw the ball around Jalen Jones when he was with the Aggies. So he's got all the ability to make it happen. We'll see if he can continue to rise. The last one, this one's huge. This is massive, and we have to discuss a scenario if we're talking about this happening, and that's Daniel Jones. I think it was, I can't remember the show, but there was a prominent NFL podcast that had him as a potential breakout star. I wrote a piece on it. Has struggled mightily. Has a disgusting win percentage. I mean, the guy. I don't even have to look it up. 24 wins, 44 losses, and a tie as the New York Giants starting quarterback. But he's got the best squad he's ever seen. Okay, what are you thinking here? I thought that this was a perfect quarterback. He didn't have many to choose from, but he has his entire future on the line here, right? Like he needs to win this starting job in different ways, but I think as much as Anthony Richardson does, right? Because his whole career could just go right off into clipboard holding, and Richardson is supposed to be the future of Indianapolis, and that might be over as soon as it started.
Yeah, so when you're talking about stakes, both of them are high. I think Daniel Jones is
huge.
His stakes are staying in the league, right? Like, or at least being more than a vet minimum, third string, whatever, a competition quarterback that you bring in during training camp. I think Anthony Richardson, even if all hell breaks loose, Daniel Jones wins the starting job, Anthony Richardson barely sees the field this year. I think he'll still get some opportunities around just because he was a former number 4 overall pick, still pretty young. So I don't think it's going to be over for him if Anthony Richardson doesn't win the starting job. If Daniel Jones doesn't win the starting job and he doesn't really impact things in the way that $12 million would indicate the Colts want him to impact things, then his career is going to be looking a little bit rougher moving forward, especially when going into his age 29 season next year. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot on the line for him, obviously. He's played his entire career with the New York Giants, didn't get any playing time with the Minnesota Vikings last year, but despite the rough career that he's had and the bust that I think we even talked about him being in last week's episode, he's been to the playoffs, has a playoff win, has that postseason success in at least in some sense that Anthony Richardson doesn't have. Genuinely has been more accurate, albeit not by much, than Anthony Richardson. And while still, I mean, I think the memes are going to be endless of of that long run he had where he tripped over his own shoelaces on the 10-yard line and fell. I mean, he has running ability, and he's gonna, I think, is really well suited to Shane Steichen's offense and the RPOs that he's gonna want to run and the quarterback run or quarterback powers that they're gonna be able to run at the goal line. I don't think any of that comes out of the playbook when you have Daniel Jones in at quarterback. Maybe you're not leaning on it as heavily as you would with Anthony Richardson, but I think he's still the type of athlete that can make you pay in those situations. So, yeah, it just comes to, there's so many scenarios where he doesn't see the field this year, and it's not really anything to do with him. I think he can come out and play pretty well, and if Anthony Richardson also plays well, then Anthony Richardson's going to get the nod at the starting job, and Daniel Jones isn't going to get much chance to show what he can be. So I think he's playing at a slight disadvantage there. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy that when he gets on the field, he's going to have to take advantage. And like you mentioned, the cast that he's going to be playing with, as long as Tanner Bordellini, Matt Gonsalves, as those are variables on the offensive line, but as long as those work out, it'll be a pretty solid offensive line that he's playing behind with an elite running back in the backfield with him. I know he's had that in Saquon Barkley, but then he's got a really well-rounded receiving core that we've talked about, and Josh Downs, Pittman, Tyler Warren, Alec Pierce, maybe A.D. Mitchell, depending on what he brings to the offense this year. I like the supporting cast for him. I like his chances to be able to make some noise beyond what expectations are.
Yeah, and look, if Daniel Jones starts over Anthony Richardson, I love that Noah said if they're both playing, let's just say they're both killing it, right? They're going to go with Richardson. They're just going to do it. All right. Yeah, they're paying Daniel Jones $14 million. That's so that they can do this, so they can actually put Richardson out there and say, "You're good, dude. Like, you're good." He needed that competition, but if Jones outright beats Richardson week one, they're both healthy, and you're starting Daniel Jones. Richardson can't even get the starting job. He's, by Indianapolis standards, up to that point, you can consider that, I think, a bust.
Yeah.
I mean, if he can't beat Daniel Jones out of the starting job, given that the Colts, like again, Noah said, if they're both at the same level, they're automatically going with Richardson. Yeah. They need him to succeed. But I love that you mentioned that because, look, if Daniel Jones is out there starting right away, something is wrong with Anthony Richardson's play.
Yeah, I think that's funny that you bring that up. If Anthony Richardson can't beat Daniel Jones, he's a bust. I think it works the same way. If Daniel Jones can't beat out Anthony Richardson, you're not looking favorably on that either, because Anthony Richardson historically has struggled. Was the least accurate quarterback in the league last year. Benched once already. I feel like if you're a guy that's been benched once already, I think that leash gets a little bit tighter when you're going in there. If you get the starting job, I don't honestly at this point, I don't know if I would rather be the quarterback who gets to start week one or not, because I feel like even if you get that start week one, your leash is so short with a guy behind you ready and raring to go, where if you lose the first two games, you're not playing well, you're going to get yanked pretty much immediately. So I think, man, it's going to be so back and forth with these guys, and then you're taking into account the injuries. More likely than not, Daniel Jones is going to have his chance this upcoming season to perform as a starting quarterback in this league with the best offensive cast that he's had around him. And yeah, just by definition of what a breakout player is, I think even if you get a quarterback playing it slightly above what their expectations are, I think you can qualify that as a breakout just because of the weight that a starting quarterback carries.
Well, and just Daniel Jones's career, it has not been good. Like, I mean, you're looking at 69 games played. He's thrown 47 picks, which isn't an astronomical amount, right? But like, he's also only thrown 70 touchdowns, and we're talking in 69 games started. He's barely averaging over a touchdown a game. Okay, and then you got to take into account these last two seasons; they've been awful. He's only played 16 of the games, and he has 10 touchdown passes, 13 interceptions, and a brutal 3-13 record. So, I mean, he does not have success, but I will say one thing going in his favor with the Giants, he did get sacked almost 3 times a game. That was an offense that just was not helping him. They didn't give him much, and you expect him, by the way, by all regards, when they selected him 6th overall, everyone was like, why?
Yeah.
Why? And so he's, yes, a 6th-round pick, but he probably shouldn't have been, right? Like, of course he shouldn't have been, but we'll have to see. It's Daniel Jones's and Anthony Richardson's year to lose, uh, and the trajectory of their futures just get completely thrown out of whack. But yeah, that is our show. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. We have a whole bunch of viewers in here, and yeah, Chet, Laval, Teresa. Don, thank you guys so much. Antonio, so many of you guys jumped in here. JV McHenry with the $5 super chat, and then of course Young Empire making comments every time about Michael Pittman Jr. But yes, thank you so much, guys, and of course, do not forget to like the Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow Indianapolis Colts on SI on X. We are at Colts_SI. Subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube and click the bell to turn on notifications if you want to listen to the podcast. Subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you listen to podcasts. So, yes, guys, have a wonderful Monday. We'll be continuing our Colts coverage on Thursday. Enjoy your night, and we will be seeing you guys here near the end of the week.